right, Matt, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here today with me.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me, Paul.
Well, I got to visit your shop, I don't know, when was it? 3-4 years ago now. It was a fascinating visit. I've kind of been dying to let you share your story ever since we created this podcast. So thanks for jumping on with us and sharing the story of Clinkenbeard. So let's start with sort of the origin story. I know your dad bought the business a long time ago, and then share a little bit of what it looks like to you today and what you specialize in.
Okay, sure. So Kenneth Clinkenbeard was the founder of the company Clinkenbeard, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. That's where the weird name comes from.
Yeah.
I say Clinkenbeard in German means weird stuff when you translate it into German. We do have a lot of strange projects. So Kenneth started the company in 1966, and my father bought it in 1978. So I was 4 years old at the time. So yeah, I've been around the shop pretty much since I was 6 or 7 years old. We did some sand molding. We had Bridgeports that I would come in and clean on Saturdays with Stoddard solvent. All kinds of fun stuff as a young little guy learning what a shop is all about. So I've been here since then. Through high school, drove a truck, swept the floor a bit, and then I was never a lover of academics. So I ended up foregoing college and actually did a 5-year apprenticeship in pattern making. So I'm technically a journeyman pattern maker. So that was the beginning of my life at Clinkenbeard. So I will say this podcast is called Machine Shop Mastery. I'm not so much a machine shop expert. I would call myself more of an expert in pattern making and the mock-up and training device side of the business, but I'm pretty well versed on machining as well.
Yeah, well, you guys have a lot of very nice CNC machines there. So, but what you do with them is really fascinating. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little more about what Clinkenbeard specializes in?
Okay, so since 1966, we were founded as a pattern shop. We were Kenneth Clinkenbeard actually founded the company as Hitchcock Industries. Hitchcock is a foundry in Minneapolis, I believe, pretty good sized foundry. And if you don't know much about Rockford, Sunstrand, who is now Collins Aerospace, was founded in Rockford, and Woodward is also founded in Rockford.
Oh, wow.
So Hitchcock and Kenneth thought it would be a good idea for them to have a pattern shop in Rockford, Illinois. So that's where it came about. So for the first 15, 20 years of our lives, mainly pattern making.
Okay.
Kind of through the 80s, we evolved into, I think in 85, we got our first 3-axis, and maybe 86 got our first 5-axis Charnoa machine. Mm-hmm. So we got reasonably early adopter for a small business on the 5-axis side of the business. Also got into 3D a little bit after that. We had a customer come to us and say, "Hey, have you heard of CAD?" And we're like, "No, what's CAD?" So that was kind of the beginning. I think they were running Unigraphics at Sunstrand back in the day. Yeah. So we ended up putting in, I think they let us borrow a seat actually of Unigraphics, and we ended up putting a version of SurfCam in, I think in like 88 or 89. And the rest is kind of history. That's where the growth kind of came from once we went to that 3D side of things. So now at this point, we're mostly defense. We do quite a bit of space. We do quite a bit of commercial aerospace, and then we have some heavy truck customers as well as some industrial customers. Right. Billet 5-axis machining, mostly pretty complex stuff, is what we specialize in. We don't do a lot of simple stuff. Quite honestly, we cost too much. Mm-hmm. So we tend to stick to the more complex parts with a lot of outside processing because we love them most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely saw some very complicated parts when I toured your place. And so not only do you make just, components, but you often put them into these very complex mock-ups, like the one on the wall behind you, I guess.
Yeah, so mock-ups are another thing we've been doing for over 50 years. They started out very simple. If Sunstrand back in the day, in the 60s, was making a generator housing and they wanted something to show a customer or a proof of concept or something like that, we would literally make one out of a block of wood, put hardware on it, electrical connectors, plumbing connectors, whatever needed to be done, put a beautiful paint job on it, and they could put that in front of their customer and say, "Here's the new generator," and it would have a nameplate on it, and it would look like the real thing. So that's how that kind of morphed, and that morphed really into the early 2000s into about 2012 when we really started taking off on I call them training devices now. They're still mock-ups technically, they're fake, but we're doing F-35 engines that are so real that mechanics think they're real when they walk by them, and it's got full blades and stators inside, so they can do full borescope up inside the engine. With damage faked in and baked in, so the parts look burnt or chipped or that sort of thing, so they can go in with a borescope and see serviceable and non-serviceable damage, which is a huge deal.
That's fascinating. Yeah, very cool. And I think I remember picking up a part, and you said it had not only look exactly the same on the outside, it has to weigh the same. The CG has to be the same.
I think on most of the really touchy training devices we're within around 5% of center of gravity as well as weight. So when when the mechanic is actually pulling off a fuel pump, it's got to drop the same as what it's going to when it comes off the gearbox. So it's got a spline shaft on it. The spline is pretty close as far as tolerances go to what the real thing is. If there's O-rings involved, those are involved. It's got to feel just good enough for them to be able to get that full experience. But no fluids in what we do, no oils, no fuel, stuff like that. They're literally taking these components off, and if something's wrong with them, they're going back to depot with that, and they're just putting a new fuel pump on, just like your car dealer. So they're not getting into a fuel pump, for instance, and changing impellers out in the field or anything like that. So it's really a modular trainer.
That's such a niche business. It's very cool. It's very, very cool. It's definitely not something that most shops get into.
No, it's kind of a conglomerate of, we're pattern makers. We machine a lot of castings. That's kind of a specialty of ours, and it's not the easiest thing to target a casting and machine it and make it a good AS9100 part with a bunch of post processing. And then we also will lay up composite here. That sort of thing. Not a lot, but when we need to, we got a lot of talent around here to be able to do a lot of different things in a smallish building.
Yeah, I think I even saw a LinkedIn post from your company just a couple days ago about a clean room environment that you just built.
Yeah, it's not an ultra clean room, but it's FOD free, and it's got downdraft tables, and so we're getting to the point we don't need a full clean room yet, but at some point we'll go there as well. Just nice to have. The customers love to see you doing installs and that sort of thing away from the rest of the shop. So
yeah. Very cool. So it sounds like you guys got into that business very organically from the earliest days and those customers and what they were asking you to do for them. And definitely. So I guess maybe for some of those listening, and even myself, to be honest, what exactly is pattern making?
So pattern making, a pattern is a tool that a foundry will use so if it's a sand foundry, for instance, it's the tool that they are ramming sand around, and then they're removing the tool from the sand leave the cavity in the sand. So then you pour metal into that sand mold, and then there's your casting. So you kind of have to think in reverse, and it's a lot like mold making. There's draft involved, and everything's got to be angled so it'll pull out away from the sand mold without damaging it, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of reverse thinking when you're doing it. I attribute that engineering mentality to what we do. And I think that's a big kind of special sauce for where we came from and why we're still kind of thinking backwards. And we're pretty resourceful with all the options, additive and everything else of what you can do these days with technology. It's pretty amazing, but we still go old school and use castings where needed. That's still pretty useful.
Very cool. Very cool. So when your dad bought the business in 78, must have been pretty small, and you guys grown a lot over the years. Can you just share a little bit of that growth story? You
bet. So I believe, if my memory serves, he bought it in 78. I think revenue was around $125,000 in 1978. And yeah, it is a little business. I think it was around, I'm guessing around a dozen pattern makers at that point when they started the business. So just to give you a update to today, we were just under 14 million in revenue this year, or 2023, sorry, with 32 employees. So when you do the math on that, am I happy with the growth? Yeah, I am. That's basically 100 times growth in 50 years. And the amazing thing is, you look at technology and what that's done. We are now doing 100 times the revenue 50 years later with a little over double the people.
Yeah. That is
just
truly
goes
remarkable.
to show the digital world we live in, and Moore's law is real.
Mm-hmm. And so, that is a very high revenue per employee number. It sounds like technology has been a really key part of that for you guys. Obviously, early adopters of 5-axis. What other things do you feel like allow you to, hit that high? It's impressive.
I would say, like I said, the resourceful thinking with some of these mock-ups that we're doing, it's kind of redesigned from the ground up, and we got a resourceful and talented group of guys here that are able to do that pretty effectively. We outsource when we need to.
Sure.
Our largest machine will go up to about a 50-inch diameter. And that's a large DMG 5-axis mill, but we only have one of those, so larger parts we'll outsource to places who can handle a little bit easier than we can. So our I'd say our perfect part is a 2-foot cube or smaller.
Okay.
That's kind of what we fit into.
Yeah.
So as I said, being able to do so many things under one roof and being resourceful and kind of crafty like we are, I think that's what drives that higher revenue growth with some of these large projects that we're able to do.
Yeah. Fantastic. So it sounds like you have probably pretty good tenure. You have folks that have been with you for quite a long time, I imagine.
We have quite a few. Yeah, I hit my 30 year. Technically, it's full time last October. We got another 28, a 25, and I got 3 or 4 other people pushing 20. But we have hired, I think, 7 new people in the last year. So that pushed that tenure. I do actually watch the tenure, and we're around 8 years at this point. Okay. But before that, we were a little over 11. Wow. And our average, our median age is around 45. I watch that pretty closely, too, because I've walked into a number of shops and walked around, and it's the silver tsunami coming in a year or two, and they look like they have deer in headlights. They have no idea what they're going to do, or sometimes they don't even know they have a problem. That doesn't work.
Sure. Yeah. That's very wise of you to look at those things. What is people wouldn't stick around that long if they didn't love working there. What's your secret sauce for your culture and employee engagement and retention?
I would say we try to keep it as a mom and pop even as it grows. Okay. And that's not easy. We put quite a bit of effort into that, and I'll tell you, we can also do better at that, and that we're always striving to. But I think people want to work for a company that feels like a family. That takes effort for sure. So I think even to private equity companies and that sort of thing, they've understood, as hard as it is to find great employees, you better care about your employees. I think we've always done that. I don't think that's new for us. But in this day and age of finding the right talent and trying to keep the right talent, it's even more important. So that would be, I think we have really cool projects. I think that's a huge driver. People want to be around cool stuff. And these guys are gearheads and, nerds as far as technology goes. So the more you can put in front of them and let them play with toys. I mean, it's really just guys playing with toys, right?
It's a good way to summarize it. Yeah. You mentioned private equity, and I know that part of your story is going through that process and coming back out of it. I'd love for you to share. It's an unusual trajectory, and I think really interesting because you guys obviously did it much earlier. There's kind of a groundswell right now where private equity is quite interested in manufacturing companies.
For sure.
But you guys did it way, way before, and have. Yeah, so I'd love to have you share that.
You bet. So my father owned the company for around 30 years, ended up a little over 30, ended up selling it in 2011, which was a tough decision. It had grown to the point of he didn't want it to come in between the family members, and he had a 50-50 partner. So they decided to put it on the market and sell it, and then he knew we were valuable employees, the family that was here, and we're all still here. So not always a bad story. So had a little bit of frustration to get over with that decision. Quite honestly, it took a bit and it stung a little, but I think it was the right decision in the end.
Got it.
So late 2011 went to market, and we were very much a mom and pop until then. And then if you've dealt with private equity, they're going to come in. We had a really good group that we work with out of Milwaukee. Actually, the current Generation Growth Capital is the name of the private equity group that bought us. One of the current owners of that actually bought us off to the side a couple years ago as a side investment. That's not private equity.
Okay.
So just to jump ahead, but yeah, we had around 10 years as a private equity owned company. And obviously the immediate changes they're going to make. Sometimes it feels like, hey, you don't know what you're doing. Do this, even though it's said a little nicer than that.
Sure.
But immediately ERP system was installed. Immediate. How are you going to grow this business? Which for the last 10 years or so, I feel like we were a bit stagnant on growth with the previous owners, my father and his partner, which it makes sense. They were getting ready to be done with the business at some point. It was very profitable. It was pretty controllable. They wanted to get away from the business when they could. So I think we stagnated a little bit until 2012. And then wheels came off a bit as far as growth goes. We had some projects lying out there that previous owners didn't want to touch, and we immediately went after those. And that's some of the big engine training device stuff that we landed very quick after. So that was a big growth spurt for us getting into that with the new ownership.
Okay. Did the new ownership bring a lot of just sort of financial sophistication, or just better look at the numbers and metrics, and what other kind of operational changes, what happened during that period of time?
I would say definitely more metric focused. They were used to dealing with other businesses that had metrics, and we weren't a big metrics company. I don't think most mom and pop, I think they look at a few things and they go, we're good. Profitability's up. I'm still making plenty of money, so don't mess with it. But metrics for sure came into it. The ERP system was a huge change for us. We had a good bookkeeper doing our accounting, and he was super helpful. But that wasn't good enough for the private equity groups. They wanted to switch everything over to their accountant, which was a huge change for us. But even the office manager in the office was getting towards retirement at that point. She kept ledgers. All handwritten ledgers.
Oh, wow.
So we went within a year or so from handwritten ledger notes and everything else to an ERP system. It was just kind of an eye opener. So took some pushing to get people to start thinking the way the new owner wanted it to look, as more of a corporation.
Sure.
For sure.
And how long did your dad and the partner stay on after selling?
1 year.
1 year. Okay. Just a transitionary period.
And I think that's a lot to ask. I've seen this go down several times with businesses. To stick around and watch the baby that you grew into an adult change dramatically, quickly.
Yes.
It can't help pretty much but feel like, what are you doing?
Right. Yeah.
So there was definitely some of that.
Yeah. When we sold Pro CNC, it wasn't to private equity, it was to another private company. But I felt the same way. They asked me to stay for 2 years, quite honestly, and I barely made it one. And I was like, plus, we had another venture to go off and was very excited to go do. But even if I didn't have something else to go do, it was hard to watch some of the changes, because it's your baby, and it's let's make your baby look a little different than it did before. So.
For sure. And it takes a lot of humility to watch those changes, and some of them are right changes. It takes a lot of humility to go, that was a really smart change. But you get to the point, I think you're kind of done with a business when you're to the point of selling it. Of course you want it to do well, but
sure.
I haven't seen a lot of looking back from them either.
So you were in the business prior to 2011.
Yeah.
Right. And
I started
role or
93.
Oh, 93. Okay. And did your role change, I imagine, through that period of time?
It did. I would say for the first 10 years, I can explain a little more about the business. I came in 93 full time. So we were still doing quite a bit of pattern making at that point. And we had probably 7 or 8 pattern makers who were pushing retirement age. And I pushed really hard to get SolidWorks in. We were using SurfCam at the time. And I said that SolidWorks is a whole different deal and we could apply it to patterns. And we started using, it was Delcam at the time, but started using PowerMill. PowerMill would automatically put draft angles onto the tool paths, which was pretty amazing in the day. So we ended up phasing out the pattern makers within 3 to 5 years, I would say. And all 7 or 8 of them were able to retire off in the perfect timing, bringing SolidWorks in and Delcam and everything else. So it worked out beautifully. And we ended up with probably 2.5 people doing the pattern making department. I was one of them, but still having the output of the 8 because they were artisans, making core boxes and patterns to cross-section drawings. So just to see that evolution and have that work out well. So we didn't put anybody out of a job, but even got more and more profitable on what we did and faster. That was the beauty of it. Not only could you be more profitable, but you'd be able to deliver quicker and beat other people to market. And that's a great sales pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just a great example of using the right technology to really advance the business.
Yeah. So for the first 10 years or so, I was a pattern maker. Second 10 years I was here, I got into mock-ups a lot heavier as the evolution of mock-ups and training devices came around here. And I ended up being director of mechanical prototypes, we called it. So when private equity bought it, I was in that position. And they brought another GM in at that point. He lasted a few years, not the right fit for the company. And I ended up becoming GM, I think, in 2015 or 2016, right around that time frame.
Got it.
And then became president 3 years ago.
Okay.
So that's been my evolution here.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Well, let's see if you have any other questions about the private equity side of things. I mean, it makes sense that, in many ways they kind of add some maturity to a business, that may not have been there as much as a mom and pop shop. Oh yeah. On the what ERP did you guys choose at the time? And was it one that they were putting into any business they bought? Like standardization?
I would say pretty much Epicor is what we went to.
Okay.
And I felt like for a first ERP system for us, never having one, that was a big jump.
That's big. Yeah.
I think there could have been, and it was just built. I mean, it could run $1 billion company.
Sure.
We're a very small business, so I think it fit okay in the end. But it took us part of that was just that ERP transition. No matter what ERP they put in, was going to be a massive change for us, pretty much overnight. I think it was decent, and as you know, we switched out of Epicor 2021 and went to a ERP called ProShop, which we love.
I do know that. Yes.
And that's it's the type of thing. It's obviously a lot more customized to our business. Doesn't feel so big and bulky, and it's built for an AS9100 platform like we are at this point. So that was a really nice changeover. Would have been beautiful if we could have done that right out of the gate with private equity, but that wasn't in the cards because ProShop wasn't around yet.
We weren't up for sale back then. Yeah. When did you get your AS9100?
2009, I want to say. So we've been about 15 years?
Quite a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a much earlier revision of it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. So let's see here. Now that you talked about, let's talk about metrics a little bit. You talked about looking at, employee age. You looked at tenure. What other metrics do you track to, keep a finger on the pulse of the health of the business?
On-time delivery is a big one, which a lot of people are struggling with currently. I still think the supply chain's a bit broken, so that's a really good one to keep your finger on. Cost of quality, NCRs. We watch AP and AR both pretty closely on a weekly basis. Yeah, we watch profitability by job and ProShop, and then obviously aggregate it weekly or monthly at least, and kind of see how we're doing, keeping our finger on the pulse. Spindle hours is another one. Quite honestly, we need to run a lot more spindle hours than we do currently. That's caused by quality delays and just doing a lot of first piece with a lot of FAIs. Yeah. We can always go faster, and we need to go faster on that to get spindles running. We recently, our new director of operations started looking at spindle hours versus labor hours, which I think is a pretty interesting way to look at it.
Sure.
So we're not publishing that yet, but that's coming out soon, and everyone in the shop will start seeing that metric.
Got it. Very interesting. So on the just overall spindle time, especially as it relates to first articles and inspection, what are some of the things you're trying to put in place to increase that spindle time and reduce the amount of time you're waiting on FAIs?
One thing is work mix. Historically, we've been a heavy development shop, and we're moving more towards a production shop.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean we won't do development. We will just do less development, and we will look at development with legs to go to production.
Got it.
So 3 years ago, we put in an Aroa robot, 250 kilogram robot dynamic, and that's loading 3 DMG 5-axis machines.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So we have open capacity in that. So we're pushing more and more towards higher quantities and part families to be able to take in the right things on the development side and then keep them in production as well. We've made the mistake of taking on too much development at one time, and it just kills you. It just slows the system down so much.
Yeah, it's hard.
So
yeah,
especially on the space side of things, space customers are going crazy. It's absolutely amazing the amount of parts that they have to job out on a weekly, monthly basis.
Sure. Yeah, we have I know many shops that are deep into space and just have way more work than they can possibly handle. So I'm just curious, that Aroa robot, is it feeding just a pallet pool that's going out to 3 machines, or what's the configuration of it?
We have 3 pallet cabinets. I think we have 36 total pallets, and between the 3 machines, 330 tools or something like that. Okay. And it's on a linear slide. So the robot goes up and down a linear slide. We can just expand it down the shop and add, I think up to like 7 more machines. So we have 3 machines on it currently, but we can just lay more linear slide, and it can keep going down the shop. And if a big project comes in, we can just add some track and put another machine in, and automatically, learning curve's done. Just put another machine in and get it rolling.
Yeah, that is a brilliant way to increase spindle uptime for sure. And just repeat part numbers. The reason I asked is I just wrote a little something about the delays of inspection for spindle time. So it's really kind of funny that you mentioned that. And one of the things that, in our experience certainly has a contributing factor in a lot of shops. Some shops do this well, others not as well, is, having even the inspection plan fully developed way up front. So it's not like the part arrives in inspection and they're like, okay, what's the plan, right? The plan has to be done way early.
Yeah.
Are you guys taking that approach?
We are finally, but
okay.
I have a lot less hair because we haven't historically. So at this point, and I will say, give another nod to ProShop. ProShop, not only was that a game changer for us for an ERP system, but it's so process based that it really made us look at our own processes and go, we're weak in this and we're weak over here, and that APQP type thinking, to get the quality plan done up front and to make sure that communication between the program and the machinist is actually getting to quality. I think that's a struggle in any shop until you get that procedure put in place, and it takes a lot of effort on the front end to make sure everybody's, you got to have more meetings. Nobody loves meetings, but you got to get all the people in the right room. Where we are at this point anyway, to get them to talk through this and make sure the way we're going to machine this is the way the guy's going to inspect this to make sure everything matches in the end. Yeah. So I think that's a road you can go down, and you try to hurry up and get something running. And I'd say that's been our fault in the past, and wasn't always bad because faster Estes, was our niche, trying to get something very quick to a customer. Sure. That's what they were buying, but you really kind of hurt yourself by not doing that planning up front and doing especially that quality planning up front, making sure everyone's on the same page before it starts proceeding through the shop. Yeah. You can avoid a lot of potential pitfalls with better communication up front. For sure. Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges you guys are facing today? I would say finding the right talent. We do pretty complex stuff. We got a lot of parts in the shop that are, $2,000 up to $100,000. So to find somebody that has the ability to program those and run a part through without creating scrap is extremely important to us. And with it being pretty complex 5-axis, we call them unicorns or purple one-eyed squirrels. It's just so hard to go out and find the right people currently for what we do. If you're making widgets, you go find operators and you just run more widgets, and that guy falls out and you put another person in and they run widgets. We're so the opposite of that. And to that evolution, you've got to get the tribal knowledge out of these unicorns' brains and get it into the system. And you got to get that tribal knowledge passed on to the next generation. And that's just extremely hard to do when you're under the gun to keep parts moving and make customers happy. So I would say not so much retention for us at this point, even though that's very important to us, and we've done a pretty good job on the retention side of it. But finding those new folks who can come in and be high level operators and take some of our guys who are good programmers and machinists now, raise them up and have them be more manufacturing engineering, and more dedicated programmers to be able to hand things off to lesser skilled, still high skilled, but just not this unicorn type skill.
Sure.
I think that goes a long ways, and we're trying really hard to do it, but every industry I talk to is having the same issue.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I speak at a private equity event annually. It's advanced manufacturing. I actually saw Kelsey there this year.
Oh yeah.
I think part of the issue is, and this was one of the big topics, part of the problem is commercial aerospace is trying to make its way back. It's clawing its way back. It's having such a hard time because defense is so hot right now, and space is so hot right now. Well, you didn't have all these space parts 5 years ago, for the most part.
Oh yeah.
Certainly 10 years ago, it's come on so quick, and you got all these shops and all these coders and platers and everything else being barraged by all three of these industries trying to hit them with parts left and right. So I think it's been a very, I think that's what's going on partially, obviously, with people retiring off. That's certainly been a big thing, and people not filling in those positions. But it's just such a hard environment right now to work in when you're taking a 30 or 40 year engineer and replacing him with someone out of school.
Yeah.
It's this scope creep we get constantly, and we're trying to deal with it. But suppliers, customers, and even internally, people don't know what they used to know from a tribal knowledge standpoint. So we'll get an RFQ and we'll even get an order. We don't have everything we need. Somebody's got to look through it, go back to the customer, tell them what we need. Half the time it's half there. Procurement doesn't know what they're buying anymore. That was really nice back when procurement knew what they were buying, and you could go have lunch with them and talk part families, and they knew what they were buying. Now it's all Excel spreadsheet, and it's very, very difficult. On an RFQ, we'll get an assembly drawing. Well, we need the 6 drawings for part level drawings that go with this. And they're like, oh, part level. When you say part level,
right. Yeah.
How about I highlight on your spreadsheet what we need, and I'll send it back to you, and you go get us what we need.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
It's why the world is taking forever to get stuff done.
Right. Wow. It's so interesting. So, for your own journey with those teams, it sounds like you're trying to move from these truly like journeyman level skilled unicorn that can program and set up and do everything to a more process, like you have manufacturing planners and programmers, and then set up, like trying to flow that across multiples which is more scalable, as opposed to having dozens of unicorns just doing their entire thing all by themselves. Is that kind of the transition?
Yeah. Scalable is the right word, because the way we've been running things for years and years, it's just not scalable the way it is. We can't go out and acquire the people we need to be able to hand them a drawing and say, go make this part for me. It's just getting fewer and fewer far between people like that. So we have to elevate those people, empower those people to be in those meetings up front, to plan parts out correctly, to get them put in the system correctly, and to flow it down to people who may not be able to program and think through the processing out of a really difficult part, but they could certainly do the first 2 ops on a part.
Sure.
And set up the tools and make the fixturing and everything else.
Got it. So what is the secret to making that transition from lots of siloed people doing all of it to a flow process where it's scalable with specialized people?
I was really hoping you could tell me that. It is getting people to work together who are used to working in silos. And that is a psychology experiment, quite honestly. And if you know anything about humans, they don't love change. So
true.
Our new director of operations started a year ago in June. He's done a good job. He worked at Collins. He was a Woodward guy, and then he was at a smaller company. So has his MBA, is good at figuring out how to get teams to work with one another, that sort of thing. But that's one of our biggest struggles, is trying to get that tribal knowledge moved into a group, and go after best practices as a group and flow those down once you figure them out, put them into a process once they're figured out, and flow them down to the rest of the shop. It's one of our biggest struggles, quite honestly. We're getting there, but it has its days. And while you're doing all this, you're trying to deliver product to the customer. So it's not it can't be a full-time gig. It's definitely a journey. It's going to take us a couple years to get really truly where we want to be.
Well, it's very wise to be focusing on that. Yeah, I agree with you. There are some shops that don't seem to be paying attention to this, and they have lots of very senior folks that still do everything, and they're not going to be around for a lot more years.
So
they want to take it easy in their sunset years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
just looking at ages, I mean, if our median age is 45, we have quite a few guys on the floor who are 48 to 52. So that seems like you have a while to concern yourself with these things, but somebody moves to Florida and you lose that person. There's a turnover. We don't deal with turnover a whole lot normally, but you got people with aging parents and life changes.
Of
so
course.
You can't count on having the same people around for 10 and 20 years.
Yeah, that's the truth for sure. Well, good. That's great wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. I'd love to ask, what are one or two of the most memorable experiences of growing this business over the years?
There's several. One I would quickly come up with is when we got into the very complex F-35 engine stuff. Like I said, the previous owners, we were approached to look at that, I think in 2010, and my father and his partner said, that looks really, really complex, and that's a multi-million-dollar project. It's just not something we're up for right now. And immediately after going to market, that OEM knew that there had been an ownership change, and they came back to us and said, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And we're like, "Yeah, absolutely. That looks amazing." But it's one of those amazing. It was a 7,000 pound, I think 7,000 or so part assembly, 20 feet long.
Wow.
And we have never done jet engine work. We're literally mocking up the whole F-35 engine.
Is that actually one behind you? Is that an F-35 engine, or is that a different? That's it.
So that's the Stovall version.
Okay.
That's a mock-up that we built. But like I said, at this point, it's a mix of parts that the customer provides where they want full fidelity, and then it's a bunch of parts that we make internally and dress it out. So in order to figure out what needed to be done here and to familiarize us with that engine, I actually got to go down to one of the Air Force bases in Florida, and with a couple of us went through the training class for a week, and got to sit through it with these. They look like 14-year-old kids, these kids who had just come out of basic, and they're told, "Hey, you have the aptitude. You're going to be a maintainer on the F-35 engine program."
Yeah.
So got to go through this class with these kids, learn what they learn on the training, so we could figure out from a modular standpoint and from a material standpoint, everything else, how do we fake this engine with an engine that's good enough for what they need to be doing on this? So I have a huge place in my heart for the military. Always have. I never served myself, but it's very, very touching to me to be able to deal with these folks and to see what we were going to make was going to have a massive effect on folks serving our country was just a pretty amazing thing. So one quick aside, pretty funny. So this turbine shaft has a nut that goes on at a turbine nut that gets torqued to ungodly torque. So you're using a multiplier, and you're using a multiplier. I think it was a 20 or 25 times multiplier with a 4-foot breaker bar on it.
Wow.
Right. So these kids are all in good shape from going through basic and everything else. And they're like, "Hey, you need to do this. Feel what it feels like." And I just turned 40 at that point. So I'm literally pushing 2.5 times what these kids are. So I get up there and I'm pulling on this torque, and I get down to a certain point. Both my knees crack at the right time, right at the bottom. No big deal, but they cracked. They all heard it. They all started busting out laughing. It was the funniest thing. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just a good experience, and that I would say from a from a memory standpoint, that meant a lot to be getting into this work. When we got that engine done, this is cool too. It has to go through performance testing and evaluation and approval. Mm-hmm. So it's a big engine. It's thousands of pounds. They didn't want to move it. Customer came on site. They brought the Joint Program Office for the F-35 on site. The Joint Program Office brought 2 Air Force guys in uniform and 2 Marines in uniform, maintainers. And they're the ones who did the wrenching on the machine for 2 weeks mm-hmm. to do the performance and approval testing that had to be done. So we had literally a crew of 25 people in that room watching all this testing going down. Wow. And in the middle of it, we had a few other countries that wanted to kick the tires and see what this was going to be about. So Italy actually came on site. The Netherlands came on site just to see what we were building because they'd be interested in one someday. So just can't ask for it's those projects that grow you, you know, exponentially. And that was just a really, it's near and dear to my heart, basically because of who's working on that engine. It's a super cool thing to work on for sure. Mm-hmm. But just the fact that those folks serving us are actually wrenching on something that we make is a big deal.
Yeah, that is very cool. So obviously with the new ownership, and it sounds like you very much at the helm of that, you decided, this type of project of this scale and scope is something we are excited about and do want to take on. I know that sometimes owners of businesses don't want to get, too far out ahead of their skis and like fear of stumbling or not delivering, or mm-hmm. what would you say, it required to say yes to such a huge opportunity, and for those that might be in a similar situation?
I think who you're working for and the expectations need to get set very, very well. We happen to be in a place where our relationship with that customer is almost like a family. We had a really, really solid relationship going into it. We knew we'd figure it out in the end. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that relationship and you think you might be bidding on something that other people are bidding on as well, and they are a lot more money than you, mm-hmm. look at that really closely because they are going to know some things you don't know. So I seldom have seen projects like that in my own life at this company not pay off very heavily. I think mm-hmm. you put that work in, and I think it pays in spades. But you do have to be very careful in the front end, make sure you're understanding what you're getting yourself into to a large extent. You'll never know fully. Sure. And I think that's part of why you're willing to take it on is because you don't know fully, but definitely do your homework. But in my opinion, go for it. It's going to be a growth moment for you.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Good advice. So, I'd love to focus a little bit the fact that you serve the defense industry and mm-hmm. the opportunities that are available in that industry right now, and perhaps commercial space falls in the same bucket. Mm-hmm. Cybersecurity is now more important than ever. It's becoming a huge topic. CMMC, obviously. I'd love to hear your thoughts about because sounds like you're pretty far ahead. You're pretty far down that path for NIST 800-171. Now, you have not mm-hmm. yet gone for CMMC certification yet. Are you in queue, or where are you at on that journey?
We're not in queue yet. So basically, we have all the controls in place. We're down to a couple things we got to finish up, and then documentation, finishing up all the controls and putting the evidence. We have the evidence. It's just putting it into. We use ComplyUp for our system, and that book is going to end up being that thick when we get done. That online book. CMMC it's very deep and very broad if you have much experience with it. We started going down this road, I'd say 4 years ago, much more heavily based on the work that we were doing. We have a lot of customer data on our server and in the cloud. Mm-hmm. So we ended up going to government cloud, and everything's in Azure. We have our own blob in Azure that everything gets backed up to. So it's all really controlled. We ended up switching to a company called Summit 7. Yep. They're one of the leaders. If you look at CMMC and look at they're a partner to Microsoft in 12 different ways, and they're actually helping Microsoft craft some of what needs to be done for CMMC. Mm-hmm. They're very on top of it. So we have the controls in place. We're told probably Q1 of next year with everything that's going on right now. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have a big line. You're going to have a big rush of people, and not that many auditors still trying to get audits at the same time. So I'm not in such a rush to be such an early adopter on it. I'd rather be a little behind the early adopter and just be the early adopter.
Yeah.
But like I said, we do have the controls in place, and I feel like we're in really good position on it. But there are days. I think we had one interesting thing. It was SPRS scores.
Mm-hmm.
Customers are asking for them. We had one customer come out. I don't remember. It was a couple years ago in July timeframe, maybe, or something like that, and tell us you had to have your SPRS score in by November, I believe, if I remember right. And then we had other customers come in literally a week or two within when that had to be put in. And then we had customers coming to us 2 months after it was supposed to be put in.
Mm-hmm.
So just watching the OEMs and how they're able to handle it, they're locking themselves down now, and it's no different for them. That's why this is pushed to the right several times. It's going to take some time. I can't imagine having a company with 50,000 employees and having to have all these procedures in place and have everybody follow them. It's hard enough in a small company. So I've been working on it personally for 3 years now.
Okay.
And like I said, we're in great position on it, but still have documentation and some other stuff left to get fully there. I want to get the controls in place and then worry about the documentation kind of after that. The controls are the important part, so I know we're safe where we are. We're not doing penetration testing yet, but we'll start that later this year.
Okay.
Just as we're not commanded or required to do it, but just one of those. I want our customers to feel really good about coming here and giving us their data.
Yeah, obviously, even before we hit record on this, or as we started to hit record, you were on your work laptop on your network, and it couldn't upload your files, so we had to switch to your phone, which is on your guest network, and so you're locking stuff down. That's for sure.
The annoying thing is everybody is kind of at the same time.
Right.
So stuff that worked two weeks ago doesn't work 2 weeks later because everybody's changing at the same time. So it's been a really, really frustrating process. I completely believe in what it is doing because we have given away so much technical data to other countries. It makes complete sense. Yeah. But there are some days I just want to strangle someone somewhere.
Sure. So what would you say? I mean, clearly you guys are deep in defense. You really had no option but to go down this path. There are many shops out there that do, 10, 20%, 30% maybe defense, and they're on the fence. They're on the fence. Do I go down the CMMC route? Do I just abandon defense altogether? Work on commercial and other industries? What would you say to those shops to make that decision? And how do you think that what is the ramification for shops that decide to stay in the industry?
That'll be interesting to see because they haven't really released what this is going to flow down to. So in my opinion, that's all a guess what this is going to flow down and matter for. So it's going to take a while to roll that out and flow that down from the government side. Okay. It really depends on what they do. If they end up saying, hey, we put this in place and doggone it, everybody needs to be it, and the flow down is on everything 2 years from now, that's a much bigger impact than if they throw it at the next generation fighter and the F-35 program, and that's all they leave it to. But my guess is they've spent a lot of money and a lot of time and effort on this too. I would sure hope with all the money we've spent that they flow this down, and it's going to be a big deal. If you're only doing 10% defense, you either want to grow that or you don't. And if you're going to stay at 10% defense, you're going to have a hard time. I think it's smart for you to do it. I think it's really smart for you to protect your customer data for your customer's sake, for your sake, and for our country's sake. Yeah. But it's an equation that you better do, and the math it's painfully high on what you're going to have to spend to truly get there. You can try to do it on your own. Yeah. But we're with a pretty high level outfit as far as IT goes, and I see how they control things, and I see the depth that they go through to control things. You're never going to hire an IT guy and he's just going to handle it for you. There's no way. Yeah. I feel like at this point, I didn't think I would need one. I think at some point I'm hiring an IT guy, and I have an IT company doing 90% of it at least. Right. So
you still may have a need for an internal person as well.
And part of that's maintenance. And like I said, everybody locking everything down at the same time. There are daily issues that I pull my hair out over, but I understand where they're coming from because of the lockdown. But yeah, at some point I'm not savvy enough and I don't have enough time to deal with it.
Right. Sure. So do you think for those that decide to stay in the industry, grow that percentage of their business, that it's going to be a boon to them because so many suppliers, excuse me, because so many suppliers will get out of the industry?
That's what we're betting on. We'll see. We will be an early enough adopter. We'll be shouting it from the mountaintop that we're in a really good place. And I know our customers expect it, but I also know talking to Summit 7 and talking to others, because it's not near and dear to my heart. I actually hate the topic, but it's an interesting discussion with anybody I talk to in this industry. It's going to be really interesting to see what the flow down looks like, and where it makes sense to do it and where it does not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it will be an interesting next few years to see how this all rolls out and what the supply base does to respond to it. Yeah.
I think what I was saying, and I missed it earlier a moment ago, so obviously Summit 7 and other companies are dealing with a lot of different folks on this, and they have a lot of people coming to them now saying, we have to get ready for this CMMC thing. Well, what have you done so far? Well, we haven't even thought about it yet. Sure. You know, there's still people coming out of the woodwork with, we haven't done anything yet.
Absolutely.
And that sounds unfortunately like a good chunk of the defense industrial base. So I don't know if it's just trying not to be the early adopter, thinking this is going to blow over, because I have read articles about it. You know, this is never going to become law, et cetera, et cetera. But from everything I've seen, that's just not the case. Yeah. So if you waited way too long on this, you better get moving on it.
Yeah, and I hear more about the push to try to get this to be law before the election. You know, so it doesn't get further, muddied and pushed down the road. So it feels kind of like it's accelerating at this point. Yeah.
Well, and if this doesn't do it, somebody else is going to. I mean, you have NIST revisions, you have several other things. So if CMMC is not the thing, the next thing coming down the pike is going to do the same thing, because it's worth that much money to the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, very wise of you to be on the leading edge of that. So as we look to kind of wrap this conversation up, and it's been really enlightening and interesting and fun. Thank you so much. What would you say are some of the most important strategic things you've done over the last couple decades that have put you in such a position to have just a really thriving, successful shop?
I think strategic planning, for one. We weren't strong on that. Probably that's another thing I would say the sale to the private equity group brought about. They looked at things differently and they were very interested in the short term, obviously, but they wanted a 5 and 10 year plan. So we took that half seriously, I would say, until a few years ago. And now we're taking it a lot more seriously. And we're going through another strategic planning session currently. I think that 10-year plan is a really, really important thing. Looking back, I think the AS9100 certification was a big deal for us as well. Obviously, the training device stuff that we've gotten into was just a watershed moment for us. And then I'm hoping ProShop ends up kind of doing the same thing for us. Actually, I think that's such a useful system once we start fully utilizing it the way it needs to be utilized. Yeah. I'm hopeful that that's a game changer for us.
Nice. Awesome. So what is on the strategic planning side, is it looking at, what do you want the company to look like in 10 years and backcasting? Yeah. Like, all right, what do we need to do in 5 and 3 and 1 and starting to put those in motion?
Yeah, that's definitely what it's doing. We're also looking at getting into traction.
Oh, yeah.
Working with Matt Rohde and Matt Golick on that a bit. So we're going to have them implement some things for us. Cool. They've been doing it for a while, and I think that's a quick way for us to get into it from a couple of guys who are professionals at traction. It's absolutely saying, here's what we think 10 years looks like, and 10 years is a long time.
Sure.
With technology the way it is, do we really know what 10 years is going to look like? We're guessing. Yeah. Sure. But you got to have some sort of plan, and you got to work back from that. So that's kind of where we're at. And a lot of that was going through a SWOT analysis and that sort of thing. Additive is going to be a big one. Our parts, at what point are parts auto programming themselves as far as machining goes?
Right.
When machine-based learning and that sort of thing, you're trying to look ahead and go, here's what I think it's going to look like. Companies like Xometry, having a very influential effect on the industry. So you're kind of trying to guess what it's going to look like in 10 years. probably got a better feel for 3 to 5, but you still got to look out that far to make some of these big notional decisions to be able to make changes that are going to take that long and deal with industry things coming our way.
Yeah, for sure. Having been through some strategic planning ourselves recently, it's easy to not do it because it takes time and takes attention away from getting jobs out the door or, your current work. But it is so essential to kind of set you on the trajectory to be a leader, to grow, to really be, forward thinking in technology and being intentional about where you want your business to end up.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we all get tied up in the putting out the fires and dealing with the daily stuff, and I know I don't put enough time away during the day or during the week to just think.
Sure.
And think what do I need to be doing? What's the couple? What are people not seeing right now? I think we're pretty busy in this country, and I think that's a big fault. And companies that I've seen with a great evolution and progression and what they can do are able to take that time and put those thoughts together and put those plans together. So we're trying to be very intentional on that, I would say.
Great stuff. So if maybe just last question here, if you were sitting down and talking with a group of, manufacturing leaders, shop owners, what would you suggest they be focusing on and doing to be prepared for the next phase of manufacturing in North America here?
I think the talent acquisition thing is huge. I think obviously the kind of the digital transformation that's occurring and has been occurring for a while and is going to get even stronger is something we ought to really look at. AI and how that's going to affect manufacturing. I think that's a very big deal. But hitting 50 this year, I would also say, take it seriously enough, but go home every day and hug and kiss your wife and your family and know what's super important in your life too.
Yeah. That's a good place to be grounded in. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing your incredible business journey with us. What a cool business. And I look forward to hopefully getting out and walking the shop again and seeing what else, new machines and stuff and projects you got going. And thanks again so much. I appreciate you sharing with everyone today.